I think we need to do a much better job when we hire young admission officers to help them see a journey in front of them. I think oftentimes you may know your VP or dean of admission, but you may not know how they got there. You may not know what the trajectory is. You may not know what the skill set is. You also don't even know, like, what is my earning potential in this career? And so I think we need to do a better job of helping bring people along.
Welcome to Mission Admissions. I'm your host, Jeremy Tears. This is the show designed to help you grow, both professionally and personally, in the fast-paced world of higher education. Every other Tuesday, I sit down with senior leaders, new professionals, and difference makers from across higher ed and beyond, where we'll share tips and strategies related to challenging topics like student recruitment, leadership, customer service, enrollment marketing, and time management. So if you're looking for practical advice and conversations that actually move the needle, this show's for you. Grab your notepad or fire up your notes app, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tears, and this is episode 91 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Joining me today is someone who probably travels more than I do, which is definitely saying something. He just got back from a trip, I believe, in Wisconsin. The incredible human being, a good friend, Angel Perez, CEO of NACAC. It's good to see you. Angel represents the more than 28,000 admissions and counseling professionals worldwide. And back in March, Angel was part of an inaugural summit that NACAC did that was held in Washington, D.C., their Center for Innovation in College Admissions. And one of the areas that was up for discussion that day was the current state of where are we going with the college admissions workforce. And so I reached out to Angel and said, I would love to have some dialogue with you around that because it's something that I talk about a lot in my day to day as well. And so I'm excited to dive into it together. It's good to see you, Angel. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you. And how nice that we're both in our homes and sitting in one place and not on a plane.
It's very, very nice. How are you feeling and what's your day today looking like these days, Angel?
I'm feeling really good. And my day to day is actually unpredictable because we are living in unpredictable times. So right now I'm with you on a podcast. I could be doing a media interview later. I could be having a meeting about the budget, or I could be responding to the next thing coming out of the White House. So it keeps it fresh and interesting. I love it.
I would be curious to know. I talk about time management a lot with everybody from literally senior enrollment leaders down to brand new admissions counselors or marketers. Like, what do you do besides, I'm assuming, having a wonderful assistant to keep
Oh,
yourself?
that's the big secret. Yes.
But for those of us that don't have an assistant, Angel, anything specifically you do in terms of habits or just things that allow you, because you are managing so much, to stay organized and on task?
I love that you asked this question because I'm very passionate about it and actually wrote about this in my book. A couple of things that I will suggest. One is I've learned over time that I was doing this wrong. And what I mean is, for so long, I kept saying, how do I manage my time? How do I manage my time? Really, the question I should have been asking is, how do I manage my energy? And so I pay very close attention to my energy. I know that I'm more of a morning person now, that certain kind of things need to happen in the morning because of my level of productivity. I also have a pretty good sense of when I'm going to run out of steam. And so we put pauses in my calendar. Like you just mentioned that, I was just in Wisconsin, but I've been traveling nonstop really since January. And so there is a pause in my calendar coming up for a couple of weeks of just not only no travel, but also just no speaking engagements, no podcast. You're the last one I'm doing, Jeremy. And, just so that I can manage my energy. And then the other thing I would really recommend people reading the book by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. I learned a lot from him about time management and really self management. And one of the things he writes about is that we should all work in seasons. And that means that you should have your intense periods, but there should be a period where you're pulling back. And I think the reason our profession is facing so much burnout is none of us are pulling back. We just keep going and going and going and going. And we need to be much more intentional about putting those pauses into our calendars. And it doesn't matter if you're a brand new entry level admission officer or if you're the dean of enrollment or the president of the college, everyone has some sort of autonomy that they can use here. And so, Slow Productivity, check that book out.
I love that you hit on a couple of things there because I couldn't agree with you more, and they've been super helpful for me too. You have to have pauses without question. I
Yes.
inserted that probably 8 or 9 years ago into my days, even when I'm traveling. Obviously, if I'm speaking all day, there are pauses that happen naturally. But when I'm at home, like for example today, I absolutely every couple of hours just take 5 or 10 minutes. And sometimes I'll walk outside, and sometimes I'll go get a glass of water, and it doesn't matter what it is, but just something to kind of just walk away, breathe, and just kind of, pause and take a little bit of reflection for a second. And so I think that's super important.
And I would add, because what you just said is very powerful, put it on your calendar. I think the reason most of us give it up is because it's not on the calendar. So every day in the afternoon, there's a 15-minute meditation period on my calendar. Just I'm a meditator. I like to do it in the morning and in the afternoon when I can. Um, but it's a pause. It's just an intentional pause to stop. And so adding these kinds of things to your schedule so that it's not something that you miss, and don't let other people take your time because they will. And I think it gets harder as you move up the ranks in the profession because there's more and more demand, there's more opportunities to say yes to things, you're being invited to a lot of things, so the power of managing your time, managing yourself, but also learning how to say no, which, you talked about and I write about in my book. I literally say, "Here are some of the things I use, strategies I use on when I say yes to things." That is actually what keeps us going for the long haul when you learn how to manage yourself.
Absolutely. You have been traveling, as you alluded to, a ton lately. And so I'm curious, even if you take the last 6 months to a year, Angel, what are the one or two things that have been brought up most during the conversations that you've been having with, people within the higher ed industry, whether it's on the leadership side or just, whatever position that they're in?
Yeah, I'll mention a few things. One, I think it's, as you alluded to earlier, it's the burnout, it's the exhaustion, it's the constant responding to crisis. That's not new, but it certainly feels a lot more intense over the past year since the new administration took office. And there's a lot coming at our higher ed colleagues that they weren't used to dealing with before. And so, trying to stay on top of that and still do your day job, by the way, I think is extraordinarily challenging, which I can empathize with. So that's one. Two, there isn't a room that I walk into without someone talking about AI and the future of AI and how is that impacting students and the profession, and how it's going to evolve the way that we all work. I think that's another big one. And then I think the third one, and we've been talking about it already, is in the spirit of all of the demands that are being placed on admission professionals now, is how are we, and this is a conversation I just had with a group of leaders in Wisconsin, is how do we inspire the next generation of young people to stay and grow and develop as they are seeing their own leaders burn out, as they are seeing the incredible demands placed on their shoulders, and they're asking themselves the question, is this what I want to be doing with my life? And I'm someone who has sat in that chair, knows the joys and the challenges of being an enrollment leader. I think there's an incredible amount of joy and satisfaction that you can get from the role, but we need to train people in the new skill sets that are required to be successful. And so that's been top of mind, especially for like directors of admission, deans of admission, and VPs. That topic comes up everywhere I go.
You hit on a couple of things there. I definitely want to ask you in a minute about the high turnover that continues to obviously plague the industry, but I would love to pick your brain because I know you're passionate about leadership as well, like I am. Without question, I would argue that teams take on, a lot of the same traits as their leader. So talk to me more just about things that maybe leaders don't think about when they're in that leadership chair, that whether they realize it or not, that their team is noticing and paying attention to, that like may end up, I'll say, being detrimental, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. There's so many examples. But I'll start by saying one of my favorite quotes by Peter Drucker is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the leader is responsible for shaping the culture, not creating it, because that is co created. I'm a firm believer in that. But a leader is responsible for being intentional about the kind of culture that is established in the office. And so it starts from the top, and it starts by the kind of behavior that the leader engages or how the leader behaves in times of crisis and difficult moments. I was with a group of leaders recently who had mentioned that in my book I wrote about how I dealt with difficult moments when I was in the hot seat, and when people were sort of coming at me with difficult things and say, "You never seem to get upset." And I said, it's not that I'm not emotionally attached to the work, but I'm conscious that my job as the leader is to be the calmest person in the room, especially when things are really hard, especially when things are tense. And in the spirit of your question about unintended consequences, is I believe that when leaders are calm, that when leaders can respond with deep care and intention as opposed to just whatever's on their mind at the moment. One, that's how you create a positive culture. Two, that's how you give people space and permission to speak their truth and to be able to ask, really hard questions. And three, I also think that's how you earn trust and respect. I don't know, Jeremy, if you've ever been in an office where a supervisor yelled or screamed or lost it. I think all of us have probably experienced that. It doesn't matter if that was a one-off. You will always be wondering when that character is going to show up again, right? And so I think it's so critical. So much of leadership is about emotional self-regulation. It is about, making sure that you are taking on the cause of the greater purpose over your own emotional feelings at that moment. A big part of the success is dependent on how leaders manage themselves. I keep saying that over and over again. I use the term self-care. I say it's self-management.
Self-management, self-care, however you want to refer to it, I couldn't agree with you more. And I tell people, like, you can't take care of your team if you're not taking care of yourself, right? As a leader. I mean, that's the reality of leadership. And so I do want to circle back to high turnover in the admissions, counselor role specifically, Angel, because it's been around. It hasn't changed. The running joke continues to be, if you make it to that third year, right, you're going to be here. Like, again, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this. Be as critical as you can be. What's the root cause with so much of, I'll say, the turnover at that admissions counselor role specifically?
I think there's a few. I mean, first and foremost, we certainly don't pay these folks well. I have an article brewing in my head that I haven't had the time to write, but and I could co-author with a few deans of admission who would be delighted to talk about this issue, which is, advancement colleagues, for example, at entry level positions get paid much more than admission colleagues. Yet at many institutions, your admission officers are your revenue officers at those institutions, right? And so I think one, we need to think about the pay structure, the incentivization. And I will take this on, as someone who leads, our professional association. I think we need to do a much better job when we hire young admission officers to help them see a journey in front of them. I think oftentimes you may know your VP or dean of admission, but you may not know how they got there. You may not know what the trajectory is. You may not know what the skill set is. You also don't even know, like, what is my earning potential in this career? And so I think we need to do a better job of helping bring people along.
I agree with everything you said there. I am curious to add one more thing because it's something that I hear in addition to, the pay, wanting to understand what does that path look like. I will hear from a lot of, young professionals, Angel, I don't feel like my boss truly has my best interests,
Oh
right,
yeah.
in
Yeah.
mind, meaning like I'm told to go figure it out. I'm told to go do stuff. I don't really get the clarity I'm always. And so, where does that, I mean, I'll say factor into all of this? I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah, that's huge, and I'm glad you brought it up. And it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate, as you are, about leadership and training leaders. If you think about it, no one is trained to be a supervisor. right? Like you do a good job as an admission counselor, and then, you take on some more responsibility as an assistant or an associate. Next thing you know, you're managing people and no one's actually given you a roadmap for how to do that. And so we have a lot of people who have very good intentions, but don't have the skill set. And supervision, management, leadership cultivation are skills that can be learned and honed. I mean, I think the both of us, we learned it over time, right? It wasn't a gift that we were given, and you make mistakes along the way. But I think, again, more leadership development is something that we've been trying to do here at NACAC. It's a big part, as you mentioned, about the Center for Innovation, how we recruit, retain, cultivate, prepare the next generation of leaders in the field. And I would say also the onus is not just on NACAC as the professional association. I think institutions need to think deeply about that, right? Like the minute that someone becomes a supervisor at an institution, what is the training that that person is getting? Who is the go-to when they have questions about these really hard things that they are going to be dealing with? Because managing people is hard work. If we can have a cohort of healthy leaders, we will have healthy workplaces. And we are suffering from so much toxicity all over the world, not just, in higher education in the workplace. But if we can get to the leaders and if we can train a cohort of healthy ones, then I think all of this would look really, really differently. So it's why I'm passionate about doing our piece in our little part of the world.
I'd also love to get your thoughts on this statement. Too many admissions leaders are either being asked to do or they're trying by their own, volition to do what I would consider are multiple full-time jobs, right? Which in turn then, tying this again all together, leaves less time for things like their own personal development and being able to pour into team members. Where is part of the problem, I guess, is what I'll ask you, that the structure in terms of like the organization on these college and university campuses, we have to change that, and the processes and systems and the org chart is part of the problem.
I think there's several layers of the problem. First and foremost, I agree with the statement. um, And I think most people listening would agree, but I think it's complicated. One, I think it's the culture of higher education where you're on all the time. Many people are working in residential campuses. Those are 24-hour, machines. And then there's the culture of our profession. If you think about it, there are so many opportunities to say yes in this profession. Will you go fly over here and do that junior night program? Will you cover that college fair? Will you give up your Saturday to come do my college access program? The answer is usually yes, right? I was a yes man for so many years. I had what Oprah Winfrey calls the disease to please. I didn't want any high school counselor to be upset at me if I said no about doing that night program and that, weekend program. So I think a part of it is the culture, but a part of it is our own introspection on making good decisions around what you say yes to and what you say no to. There's a lot of things you can't say no to as a new admission counselor, but there's a lot of things you can't say no to, but we just continue to say yes and yes and yes. And so I think one is having a model for, or a playbook and a framework for what are the things I am going to say yes to in order for me to, one, represent my institution well, but also perhaps thinking about my own career and wanting to make sure that I have good opportunities and advancement. I think that's another piece of the puzzle. And then the third is connected to what you say, Jeremy. I think it starts at the top. And I think leadership also has a responsibility to think strategically about how much work their teams are taking on. Here at NACAC, we have a fewer staff members than we did last year. And I remind the board all the time there's fewer people doing the work. And it's top of mind for me. One of the exercises I'm going through with my team right now is what will we no longer do? Because we keep adding, but higher ed is really bad about subtracting. So I think it's about leaders also doing some introspection and giving people permission to give them ideas around like, okay, maybe we don't do this thing anymore so that we can make space for these other things. So the conversation also has to start at the top.
Well, and that's what I'm curious about. If the conversation, because this is unfortunately not just a higher ed issue, but in many industries, if the person at the top either for whatever reason doesn't appear to be cognizant of it or just isn't prioritizing it, and then I'll say the middle management sees it and wants to do what you're talking about, what advice then would you give those people in terms of going to that senior leader and saying, hey, like, we're going to lose a whole bunch of staff members, or some things are not going to work out the way we want if we don't, I'll say, prioritize or make some changes differently?
Yeah. Well, I would certainly recommend that the conversation happens. What I have tried to coach people in those situations is around the how. How do you say it? Because it doesn't work if you just approach people and say, like, look, danger zone, we're losing people, but really more from a thoughtful, I care about this organization, I care about the team. I know you do too. Here's an observation that I'm making so that it's also a win for them. One of the things that is a skill set I think we all need to learn very early if we're going to be in this profession is becoming an astute politician. How do you make sure that what you are proposing to your supervisor is as beneficial to them as it is to you, right? And so there's a little bit of coaching that comes along with that, but I would say don't be afraid to go to the managers or to the supervisors all the way up to the dean, but make sure, you get to the appropriate levels first. If you're a year admission counselor, you probably shouldn't be going straight to the vice president for enrollment to have these conversations. But going to your supervisor, making the case, but doing so in a really respectful, thoughtful way, and in a way that positions them for success and positions you for success. Also, choose when you have this conversation, right? You don't go and approach your supervisor at one of the most stressful programs of the year to have this conversation, or begin by dropping a hint. Hey, next week, would love to find some time with you. I've been noticing some things in the office. I really want to give you some feedback on ways that we together can improve the culture here. We can improve some of the impact that this program has had or the stress that people are feeling. So that one, you give them time to think about it. No one ever wants to feel like they've been pushed into a corner, right? And so this is what I mean by becoming a astute politician. It's not just about asking, it's about how you ask, it's about when you ask, and making sure that you get to know your supervisor and their style as much as you can so that you're setting them up for a successful conversation as well. The onus is on you as much as it is on them.
I love that last sentence you just said. It is absolutely 100% true, right? The onus is on you just as much as it is on them. And so, is part of the problem, I'll say, that the employee experience by colleges and universities isn't, I'll say, a strategic priority the way it needs to be when it comes to planning. And if it is, and you agree with that as I see you nodding, talk to me more then about where's NACAC's responsibility versus the college and university's responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's an intersection. First, I'll say, yes, I agree with you. And this is from someone who worked on college campuses for over 2 decades. Part of it comes down to the culture. Um, so many colleges and universities prioritize faculty culture and faculty satisfaction over staff satisfaction. And I'm sure that some people would love to debate me on that. I'm happy to take the debate stage. But that was my lived experience. And I hear that from so many people. And so I think lots of colleges and universities need to be really intentional about the employee experience, move into building a culture of hospitality for their employees. I am a firm believer in Maya Angelou's quote: people will forget what you said, what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And yes, employees work for you and they are getting paid. But if you're trying to build a healthy culture, if you are trying to really excel at the institution, you're going to need as many people buying in to that culture as possible. And so I do think institutions have a responsibility. And I do think professional associations like NACAC, for example, have a role to play because we do a lot of training. We do a lot of training of employees. We do a lot of training of leaders. We are starting a Dean's Institute next year for the next generation of deans in the profession. And so these are the kinds of things that we are going to talk about. How do you create a healthy environment for your employees? How do you manage people in a way that, serves the institution well, but most importantly, serves them as well? So I think both of us have a role to play. And I will say, I give some credit. I'm hearing some really cool things about some ways that institutions are starting to shift the culture. I think, what was the phrase that we use after COVID? The quiet quitting and all of that, I think has shifted the mindset of HR professionals. I also think the competition for talent in higher education is pretty fierce, and so people want to attract the best talent to their institutions, and creating great places to work and great environments to work in is the first step.
I would be curious, and I'm sure the audience would too, if anything is top of mind that you're comfortable sharing. What are some of those things that you've seen institutions do to create that better culture of hospitality?
Yeah, well, I think some institutions, like I'll give a shout out to Bowling Green State University. I was just there. It's where the NACAC archives are, and so got to spend some time with their president and their cabinet. And two things that they're doing, which I think is really cool. One is they've gone through hospitality training. The staff has adopted a different mindset around how to create exciting, wonderful, meaningful experiences, not just for students, but also for staff. And so that has shifted the culture there. And then the other thing is that they are very big into the designing your life curriculum that was originally taught at Stanford University and now has become a movement across the country. And so they are teaching this curriculum and really creating this sort of like your life is yours to design mindset in students, but they're also using it for employees, right? So they're not leaving the employees behind. That we know that maybe you're a young admissions counselor here, but let us help you design your future. We would love for that future to be here, but if it's not, let us help you think about what a good fit is going to be for you. I think the more institutions are thinking strategically about the life journey of an employee and really helping them, I actually think it's a retention tool. I think some people worry, oh, well, this is going to be something that counsels them out of here. But I think if people see themselves being invested in by their organizations, that's a retention tool.
Without question. I think part of what professional development, when you do it, I would argue a way that is helpful, it allows this back and forth dialogue, for example, that you and I are having right now on the podcast. It allows us to be able to share different viewpoints, to be able to listen, to be able to be curious with each other, ask follow up questions, and kind of think about things differently. And I feel like part of that is, I'm not going to say disappearing, but it's getting reduced because of things like AI, because of
Yeah.
things like vendors saying, well, you don't need to talk about like changing your search because we can do all of that, or don't worry about this process. Let us automate it or let us do this. And so I just wonder, is any of that potentially, I'll say, hindering the professional development that should be happening internally amongst teams?
I think it's evolving. The good news is everywhere I go, leaders still talk about the value of professional development. And usually because that's what got them into those seats. And so that's what gives me hope around professional development. But I also understand that they're under a lot of pressure to meet certain financial goals, to cut their budgets. And one of the ways to do that is to slim down professional development, or maybe say, maybe you don't go to that conference, but you attend a webinar. We all know the webinar is a little different than actually engaging with people, in person, and really getting sort of the real inspiration that comes from being with your peers. So I do think we're still going to be up against that pressure, and that pressure is not going to get any easier. However, I do think professional development is going to continue to evolve. Yes, it'll still be things like conferences that we go to and webinars and trainings like the one you are providing. But I also think, especially as the roles of leadership in particular become more and more challenging, it's gonna become coaching. It's gonna become having peers and having people who've done this work coach you through situations. I mean, I'll say it, I work with an executive coach. If you were a leader of an organization, I wouldn't do the job without an executive coach. I call it my professional therapy, because these jobs can be pretty lonely and there's lots that you're taking on, and so to be able to speak to someone on a regular basis who can help you really think through complex problems, or even just vent, because there's no one you can vent to. When you're the leader, you should not be venting, especially publicly. I think we're going to see more and more of that. And we're actually already seeing that in the enrollment space. There are enrollment leaders who are working with executive coaches. When I was at my last institution, I had an executive coach who was a former college president. He had just stepped down as a college president. And so having his ear was wonderful as I navigated things like my board of trustees and, the challenges of working with the coaches and all of that. I think it's going to be trickling down to the director level, to the dean level for sure.
The core thing I keep coming back to with our conversation here is you have to invest in yourself more, whether you're a leader
Yes.
or you're an individual who's brand new. If you're listening to this, if nothing else, you sit back and you kind of take stock of where am I investing in myself throughout the year? Like, when's the last time I did something for me that helped me become, better with a skill set, develop a new skill, become more knowledgeable about something that, like, quite honestly, I probably should become more knowledgeable about. And just the intentionality, right, Angel, of prioritizing that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I do hear often, particularly from folks just starting out in the field, my institution doesn't do this or give me this, or yes, certainly you should advocate for more, but this is your life and your career and it deserves investment. So whether it's I'm grappling with whether to go get that master's degree, or I saw this really cool leadership certificate that I might want to go after, or I wanna get some coaching from Jeremy, right? Like, all of that is going to turn out to be tools in your toolkit that you use. I certainly throughout my career as a young professional, and then as I moved up, I was always paying for things out of my own pocket that were going to help me, become a stronger leader, and some of those things were related to the profession and other things were not. I think going on a yoga retreat is actually caring for myself, and I come back and my staff is like, "Wow, you're so pleasant and joyful," and right, like, that stuff trickles down. So if that's what it's going to take for you to show up at work a particular way, invest in yourself.
100%. I have a really bad golf game, Angel, but I continue to play it because it allows me to be around people I enjoy being around, and it allows me to just decompartmentalize and take my brain off of work and
And you
just
probably never think about work the
I
entire
don't.
time you're there,
Zero.
right? And you
Zero.
have to that's another secret tool if you're listening. Find the thing that puts you in a flow state where you don't think about, work. Like once a year I try to do this like hiking holiday where I just like go disappear for a week and go hiking, and just the entire time I am just in flow and having such a great time. And I come back, by the way, not only am I rested and restored, but I have all these new ideas, and all of a sudden, things that I thought were challenges, I have figured out how to solve them, all because I stepped away. So the more we can step away and refill our cup, the better we'll be at work.
What advice would you give somebody listening to this, Angel, who is less than a year into the profession? Just all the things from your seats at the leadership table to all the years you've been on campuses to all the stuff you're doing now to serve all of, NACAC's members. If you had to pick it one thing, for that new member who, again, you know, a lot of people stumble into obviously higher ed, right? And they stumble into it just like Joe Tolliver did for you. Somebody says to
Yeah.
them, "Hey, like, you would be great at this. You should do this." Okay, that sounds great. Wait, I get to travel, talk about my
Thank
school,
you, Joe
like,
Tolliver.
right. So, like, if somebody's doing it and they're enjoying it, but they're kind of unsure, like you said, what the path looks like, or what piece of advice would you give them?
Savor this moment. And I know you can't appreciate it then, but gosh, what I would give to go back and just be responsible for going on the road, recruiting some students, having lovely conversations with families, reading some files. Yes, there's a lot of stress at that. But as I move up, I I miss all of that. Like I miss the pureness. There is a pureness of the admission counselor entry level role that you are never going to get back when you start moving up the ranks. So savor the moment. That would be advice number one. And then advice number two would be that one, of course, I'd love for you to really consider staying and growing because I still think it's one of the most exciting, rewarding professions in the world. And the way that you do that is I encourage you to get off of your own campus, try to make networks in other campuses and other types of schools. Go talk to admission counselors. If you're at a small private college, go to a large state university. What is it like to work there? What are some of their joys and pain points? begin to compare what this looks like in other places. NACAC has 28,000 members all over the world. People are doing this work at tiny colleges, public institutions, regional institutions, women's colleges. Like there's so much diversity that I also think one of the ways you will find joy in the job is also finding the right fit institution. We say that to students all the time, but we forget to say it to ourselves as adults, that where we choose to work should be a great fit for us. So those are the two. I have many more I would share, but one is, savor this moment because you're never going to get it back again. That entry level pure admission counselor role, as I'd like to call it. And two, as you consider staying, venture out of your own institution and figure out what does this look like doing this work, maybe at other kinds of schools.
The last thing I do on every podcast, Angel, is something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm going to give you a
Ooh,
handful of things and I just want to get
okay.
some answers to each. All right, you grew up in the South Bronx. What's your go-to restaurant there?
Oh my gosh, pizza, pizza, pizza. I mean, I don't have an actual restaurant, but in the Little Italy neighborhood, like I just eat my way through that block.
You're a Skidmore College grad, all right? There are
Ooh.
8 traditional residence halls at Skidmore, and 7 of them
Yes.
end with the word hall. What's the one that doesn't end with the word hall called?
Oh my God. Like recently, because some of them have been renamed. I'm thinking Tower. Is it Tower?
It is Johnson Tower.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I got that. Now, of course, I was like, "Is it still called Johnson's App?"
City that you visited that pleasantly surprised you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
First one,
Um, but the one I'll mention is I was just there last week, Bentonville, Arkansas. I was so pleasantly surprised by Benton.
Walmart.
It is the Walmart HQ, and it is such a cool town. Check out Bentonville, Arkansas, especially if you're a biker, by the way, which I'm not, but they have so many biking trails. It is the biking capital of the country.
You obviously shared you like to hike. I had heard that about you. So what's on the bucket list? Where do we want to eventually maybe go and take a journey to and do some hiking? Any spots?
Yeah, so I just got back this holiday season from hiking in Patagonia in Torres del Paine in Chile. And I would like to go back to New Zealand. I only did the North Island, so I would like to hike in the South Island of New Zealand. I didn't get down there, and that's where like Adventureland is. So I am so excited to get back there.
Well, fun fact, my sister lives in Auckland, so I can give you
No way. Oh, you got
all
all the
kinds of
inside
wrecks. I've been there
scoops.
once, and my brother-in-law is Kiwi, and his whole family is there. So
Oh my gosh.
I
Oh,
will
I'm
have
gonna
to
write you
connect
separately.
you a hundred
Yes.
percent.
My
And
goal is to spend like a month just hiking in New Zealand. I would be so happy about that.
it is absolutely gorgeous for anybody that is willing to go that far on an airplane because it is
It
obviously
is
literally the
really
other side of
far.
the world. I'll end with this one, Angel, and I'll circle back because I know you wanted to share more advice, but I'll go with it this way. What's a piece of advice that someone gave you once that you're now giving other people?
Choose your bosses wisely. And it's a piece of advice I got a long time ago. And I have been the beneficiary of that advice because when I moved institutions, a lot of people thought I moved institutions because maybe institutional reputation or because it was a promotion. I moved there to work and learn from particular people. At my last institution, I moved there to work for a phenomenal college president who I thought if I go work for her, I'm gonna learn so much. And I worked for her for 5 years, and it was, like watching a master class in leadership. So I think choose your bosses wisely, follow good leadership.
Angel, I appreciate you spending some time with me and just sharing so much wisdom today that I think is quite honestly going to be helpful for anybody listening to this. And so I look forward to the next time you and I get to sit down and have another conversation together.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Mission Admissions. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's the largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451. the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.